The title of our program was The Forgotten Ones, and it was a history of the Miami County Infirmary. And the infirmary started as a result of kind of a regional and national movement to help the down and out people, the people who couldn't take care of themselves. The poor people was essentially the population that it was designed to help. And so in Miami County, it started in 1840. It was a very shoddy built brick building used to house the poor, the insane, kids who were orphaned, all of the above. That building was blown down in a storm in 1853. There were no casualties, but that resulted in the building of a new building later on that was a little more sturdy. And there were all sorts of characters that came to reside in this county infirmary. And most of the stories are really tragic and unfortunate. I mean, just because of the population it centers around. So it's really interesting to look at the history of the Miami County Infirmary because it shows us how charity evolved over time. So before 1840 in Miami County, before there was a county home for the infirmed, the poor, it was on the private sector and the churches and families to take care of their loved ones or the poor people who couldn't take care of themselves. So it's a fascinating look at this institution to see how charity evolved over time. The record books of the county infirmary are actually super interesting. We have their ledger books from like the 1850s on, and it will give they called them inmates, so it'll give the inmate's name, their age, their patient number, their reason for being there. So whether it was infirmed, poor, sometimes it would say mad or devilish, sometimes it would say idiotic, which is of course not acceptable now, but that's what the term was back then. Naturally. There were a lot of like unwed mothers there too, so there were not only deaths at the county infirmary, there were births as well. And those statistics were reported, like how many births, how many deaths. So there were births when unwed mothers would come to live at the infirmary, or down and out wives, or recently widowed women would come, move in, try to get back on their feet. Thomas Harbaugh was a famous poet from Miami County. He became kind of famous, kind of locally renowned for his dime novels. And some people looked down on dime novels at the time. They were cheap and trashy and, you know, spicy reads, spicy short reads. That's what he was good at. That was his niche. But he became quite famous as a poet. One of his poems is called The Fair Suffragette. So he wrote about the hot issues of the time, the needs of the hour.
She piled up the wrongs that her sex had endured. By nothing but right would they ever be cured. We've worked for the creature in sorrow and tears. We've sewed on his buttons for hundreds of years. And now when we ask for the ballot, he cries, "Your place is at home among the dishes and pies." I sighed as she talked, and my optics grew wet, for she was a wonder, Miss Jones, suffragette.
I read one claim that he was the first Miami Countian to be inducted into the biographic dictionary, the Who's Who in America, if you're familiar with that. So he was allegedly the first person from Miami County to be inducted into that. But at the end of his life, he was suffering from the effects of a stroke, and he couldn't afford live-in assistance or anything like that. So they moved him out to the county infirmary, even though he wasn't completely destitute. But when he died out there, you know how the newspapers do. They kind of wanted to peddle the story of the poor, penniless poet, and such was the case with Tom Harbaugh. George Green first became famous for his action and valor in the Civil War. So he was in the 11th Ohio Volunteer Infantry, and I believe it was the Battle of Chattanooga in 1863. So what George Green's group did, they charged up the face of Missionary Ridge during the Battle of Chattanooga without being ordered to do so. And what George Green did was he wrestled a Confederate flag out of the hands of its carrier. So it was a physical battle for this Confederate flag. Mr. George Green here came out on top, and that is eventually the action that would earn him the Medal of Honor, the Congressional Medal of Honor, which is a very distinct award for soldiers demonstrating valor in battle. So in the Battle of Resaca, Georgia, George Green got shot in the leg. He would eventually lose that leg. He was one of the founding members of the Troy Baseball Club, which was founded in 1866 by a group of men who, the average age of this group was actually over 50 years of age. None of them had any background or experience in baseball. Mr. George Green was missing a leg, in fact, but they did not let that stop them. They were gonna form the Troy Baseball Club.